Hey, how you guys doing? Going to share a couple things with you. Last week we were beginning talking about the covenant with Adam. Remember the story about Adam? It was really impressive. Not so impressive what Adam did, but the way, even though after Adam sinned and they fell into sin, God gave him a covenant. Now, right here we got the apple. We're not sure what fruit it was, but it said there was fruit on the tree, and we know that Adam was the individual, and that he had this covenant. And the covenant is a promise to God's people. And the passage is Genesis 3. Genesis 3, covenant. This is Adam, and this is what happened. I really like this. I'm not particularly crazy about the image, but I like the idea of what God had said. This is what God said. I think this is the Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 translation from the Message. To the serpent, God says, to the serpent, I'm declaring war between you and the woman's offspring. In other words, that's between Satan himself and the woman's offspring is the one that will come in the future. That would be the Son of God, Jesus. He will crush your head, and you will wound his heel. So there's the foot coming down on the serpent's head. We know the serpent gets killed, but in the process, the serpent bites him on the heel, which means that Jesus is going to pay, he's going to suffer for what he's done to protect us. Now, that's the covenant. That's the covenant that's been given to Adam. And the next covenant that's mentioned in the scripture is this one. This is the scripture with Noah. Now, we know all this. We know all the story. We know about the rainbow. We know about the ark and all the animals that went on. We know how long they were there. And it's a powerful story. And the best part of that is this comes in Genesis chapter 9. And it's also another covenant. And the covenant is made to all the people who, because of their trust. And this is what it says. This is from verses 9, 11, and 12. This is my covenant. I will set my rainbow in the clouds. Never again will water come to flood to destroy all life. I will remember. So that's a pretty powerful thing that when God remembers. I'd like you to, I'm not trying to be funny here, I'd like you to remember this. I'd like you to remember that God has put in you, in your being, it actually says this in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, he says that he will create male and female. And the word that he says for male is the word zakar. And the word zakar means to remember. So we're called, by definition, part of our spiritual DNA is to remember. Because those things that go back through space and time, we remember. Now, I mentioned this last week when we talked about this covenant. We talked about the covenant. It says in Genesis chapter 1, it talks about how God formed Adam. He formed Adam. And when he formed him, I made the comment that I said when he formed him, it's like, the phrase is like to build something. And a couple weeks ago I mentioned this. Some of you may remember that when I was in grade school, we went to a really small school. And on days when it snowed a lot and we couldn't get outside, it was really cold. And the teachers really wouldn't let us go outside on some of those days. So the girls in class, they would have their little needles and they would crochet. They'd crochet, yeah. And so one of those days, Marty Turbot and Janice Dubit said, they asked me, you want to crochet? And I said, nah, that's a bunch of hooey. I'm not going to do that. Guys don't do that. But you know what? I watched them do this with their crochet needles, and I thought, that's really interesting. So I finally said, can I do that? So I began to crochet. And I got to be where I made a piece about this big. I mean, it was like really wide. And I thought, I did that. I did that with my hands. Now, I brought that story up. I said, it probably took me a couple of weeks to crochet a piece that was 6 feet long. Do you know how much DNA, you know what DNA is? DNA is that That's a basic building blocks. It's called a macronuclear molecule, and it contains the blueprint for all the things that form us. And I found out that in the human body, there's about 10 to the power of 13 cells, which is about 100 billion cells. And every cell, or most of them, maybe there's a few in there that don't have it, but the cells contain DNA. Each cell contains about a strand of DNA that's about between 2 and 3 meters long, which is about, say, 6 to 9 feet long. So if you calculate that up, and they say this, I don't know this, but it can go, that's enough DNA in your human body to go from the earth to the sun and back 70 times. It's like billions of miles, like 13 billion miles. It's amazing. Can you imagine God taking the time to knit, or to, it says in chapter 139 of Psalms, it says he knits us together in unseen places. God knits us together. He really does that. Now, when he made Adam, my guess is he probably took his time. He could have done it like that. Maybe he spent thousands of years doing it because, hey, time is nothing to him. But he wanted to do it right. And when he made Adam in such a way that Adam was supposed to live forever. Adam was never intended to die. When Adam was made, when Eve was made, when he created those two individuals, they were never intended to die. They were meant to live forever. But when Adam sinned, when Adam and Eve sinned, something set in and it was curtains. End of story. He lived a long time, but he was meant to live. He would still be living now if he'd not messed up. Well, the covenant was made. This covenant was made. This covenant was made for Adam. This covenant was made for Noah. The covenant was made. And the one we're talking about now is the covenant with Abram. Now, this covenant with Abram, it was a very powerful promise. He made this promise. This is from Genesis 12. The covenant was started. The covenant, God's promise that the land would belong to him in Genesis 12:1. He would have many descendants in Genesis 12:2, and the blessing and redemption would be in Genesis 12:3. All that was promised to Abram, who later became Abram. And now in chapter 15, we're talking about that. But hey, thanks for the time now. Hope you listened to the video. We're going to be talking about it on Sunday. Blessings to you. Take care. Bye now. See ya.